For the armoured elite warrior in a melee, standing, let alone moving around, could be extremely challenging, depending on the circumstances. There were many reasons for this, and one of them was this, the ground. But not ground like this. No, this is much more like the ground that a European or a Japanese medieval warrior would end up fighting on in a melee. They rarely would start on hard, firm, flat ground. And it could be sloping, spongy, wet, but no matter how it started, very soon into a melee, the ground would start looking more like this, hundreds of people churning up the ground as they're fighting, to turn into a horrible, sticky, sloppy mess with blades sticking up, people lying around dying and wounded. This made it very difficult for the warrior to keep his balance, and it was made yet more difficult by the nature of armour. So how did the warrior accommodate for this difficulty? Well, whenever they moved, they would keep their weight low and parallel to the ground. Also, try and keep their feet underneath their middle, and even more importantly, keep their weight, the crest and the helmet above their hips. Now, the trouble with this was that in a melee, due to the very high level of noise, general sensory overload, the emotional component, and the restrictions on the vision of the helmet provided, any warrior could easily get hit by a distracted comrade or an enemy. But no matter how it happened, being on the ground was a really bad idea for a warrior. So the best way to absorb these collisions from whatever object was to adopt a wide, low stance. The trouble is, when it came to actually walking like this, obviously it's a lot more effort, plus the fact you can't really control where your foot's going to go when you take the step nearly as well, because you've kind of committed yourself to it, and you always had to be wary of things such as broken sword blades, arrowheads, whatever sticking up in the mud. Sliding your feet could negate these issues somewhat, but not only might the ground make it very hard to do this, but also, depending on the ground, it can be very easy to get your foot snagged or trapped or stuck and cause you to trip. Things get even more difficult when you add other combat realities. For purposes of this video, we're going to be using swords. However, what we're going to talk about is just as applicable to differing degrees to both shorter arms and pole arms. Whether in armor or not, when facing an opponent, it is often advantageous to have your weight on the leading leg. This means you are more prepared to advance quickly, and this is even more necessary with the armor's additional weight. And it also means that you're more able to weather impacts and attacks from the front. When you're facing the enemy and you're leaning forward, you have the added concerns of the poor ground and the chance of being hit from in other directions, which requires that as you lean forward, you lower your weight and broaden your base. This is very tiring on the legs, so that's the downside to it. Now, you add a further element to that, which is stress. One of the things that's obviously present in all melees is the desire not to die. That has the effect of you wanting to push the other warrior from you, your opponent. Of course, the warrior had the option of adopting a stance where the blade wasn't pushed forward. But the disadvantage to that is that, first of all, you can actually feel more vulnerable in all directions, and obviously any opposing warrior can get their blade much closer to you. Now, pushing your hands forward has three disadvantages. First of all, there's more weight decentralized, which can have an effect depending on how tired you are and how the ground is. Another problem is that it takes much longer to react to problems happening in other directions around you. The third problem is that it's harder to deliver more powerful attacks. In order for the arms to stay at least somewhat in front of you, they have to be much shorter. While you can continue to thrust, they have to be short thrusts. That doesn't mean that those attacks aren't sufficiently powerful, but it takes a lot more practice and a lot more skill to develop that kind of power than the much larger gross motor skill attacks. At the same time, that gives you the sense of how exposed your wrists and your hands are. Also, you're wanting to keep your upper body away from the person, while at the same time keeping the opponent away with the point of the sword. So the result is a very strange pushing forward, pulling back motion while settling the hips, which is very tiring. So moving around in a melee would have to some degree or other sucked, and the decision on how to do it would have been an ongoing, almost moment by moment pragmatic decision.